Let's read God's word together. Deuteronomy 16, 9 to 12. You shall count 7 weeks. Begin to count the 7 weeks from the time the sickle is first put to the standing grade. Then you shall keep the feast of weeks to the Lord your God with the tribute of a free will offering from your hand, which you shall give as the Lord your God blesses you. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your son and your daughter, your male servant and your female servant, the Levite who is within your towns, the sojourner, the fatherless, the widow who are among you, at the place that the Lord your God will choose to make his name dwell there. You shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and you shall be careful to observe these statutes. So that concludes our reading for now. And the title of our message this morning is Grace Abounding, Thanks Resounding. Grace Abounding, Thanks Resounding. Hey, it's Thanksgiving. It is coming in 4 days. Yay. I don't see any excitement. I can think of a lot of words to describe our emotions when we are getting close to celebrating Thanksgiving. All the words start with the letter F. We're going to have good food, right? We have fun. And you guys, you school kids, you are off school, so you enjoy your freedom, right? For a whole week. What else? Oh.
Yeah, we still have one.
Oh my.
Yay.
Now my son hears it. Anyway, so what else? Fishing.
Christmas.
Oh, feast. Feast is food.
Christmas.
Black Friday, yeah. A lot of people have been waiting for the whole year for the Black Friday frenzy. And nobody mentioned football. Oh, I'm so disappointed. Oh, so the point is, no matter how you're going to celebrate Thanksgiving, I hope that you have a sense of thankfulness in your heart, right? So let's do a short revision course on American history. So you know that. I mean, you grew up in the United States. I'm not. I'm a foreigner. So the first, what? Pilgrim. Yeah. So the history of Thanksgiving can be dated back to 1620. Yeah, in November, when a group of people, we now call them the Pilgrims, 102 in total, they sailed for 10 weeks from England all the way to Massachusetts on a ship that is called the Mayflower. Yeah. But unfortunately, they're not quite ready for the harsh winter in the United States. So unfortunately, and subsequently, half of the people passed away. But then with the help of some friendly Native Americans, they know how to readjust the way to live in the new world. And so a year later, they have a harvest celebration. So as we look back now, we can consider that the first Thanksgiving, and they invited the local folks, the Native Americans, to celebrate with them. So that's the first Thanksgiving. But it wasn't until 1870, 250 years later, before the Congress declared that Thanksgiving is a national holiday. Then fast forward to 1942, the federal government fixed the day, Thanksgiving Day, on the fourth Thursday in November. That's how the Thanksgiving came out. So that's part of the American history. But then in the Bible, God's people also celebrate their form of Thanksgiving. The passage we just read is about celebrating a festival called the Feast of Weeks. And the name for that is Feast of Harvest. Why is it called Feast of Weeks? Because it's celebrated on the 50th day after the Passover. So 7 weeks right after the Passover, 7 times 7. So Feast of Weeks, 50 days after the Passover. And it is a time of wheat celebration. Wheat with T, okay? Not W-E-E-D, all right? So it's a one-day festival for them to celebrate God's faithfulness. So we can see whether in the Bible the Israelites, the pilgrims, or even the Christians, they set aside special days to give thanks to God. But of course, just like you don't just remember your parents on Mother's Day and Father's Day, right? And we should also celebrate Thanksgiving every single day because we enjoy God's goodness on a daily, even moment by moment basis. As such, if we see that everything we have comes from God, we should also use everything that God gives us for Him. And there are some valuable reasons we can, valuable lessons we can learn from this Jewish festival. And the first thing we can learn from it is that we should give back to God. God gives us first. We should give back to Him. Verse 10 says that the Israelites should celebrate the Feast of Weeks with the tribute of a freewill offering from your hand, which you shall give as the Lord your God blesses you. Now, two things I want to point out here. Number one, it's a free will offering. It's not a sales tax. It's not a membership fee that they must pay. It has to come from their heart. And number two, they have to give in proportion to God's blessing to them. So if they have a bigger harvest in a certain year, they should give more to the Lord. And as for the whole Israel race, Leviticus 23 outlines what kind of offerings they need to present when they celebrate the Feast of Weeks. Let's go through them quickly. First, it's called a wave offering. It's something is a loaf of bread. Okay, why it's called wave? Because the priest will wave the offering in front of the altar to symbolically present it to God. Then after waving, the loaf of bread will be given to the priest as a food. Number two, a burnt offering that consists of lambs, a bull, rams, grains, and also wine. By burnt offering, everything is burned up on the altar to represent a total commitment, dedication to God. Thirdly, it's a sin offering that consists of a male goat. Of course, it is to redeem people of their sins. Then fourthly, it's called a peace offering that consists of 2 lambs. And in a peace offering, the fat and the internal organs will be burned up on the altar, but the meat of the animals will be shared among the participants. So it is a symbolic meaning of a friendship between God and people. As you can imagine, there are lots of things to be sacrificed on one day, right? So there has to be a lot of preparation work for the priest. But then they do all the work with joy because it is a harvest celebration. So, and by giving back to God first, they don't have to worry that they don't have enough food or animals for themselves. Think about it. It was about 1400 BC when the Israelites entered the land of Canaan. It's a long time ago, several thousand years ago. When they do their farming, there's no irrigation system. There is no pesticide, no artificial fertilizer, and there's no machinery. Everything was done by hand. And also, they must completely depend on God to give them a good harvest. And but then God promised the Israelites that if they obey them, God would bless them. Look at some of the blessings that God promised to give them. We'll sift through these quickly. In Deuteronomy chapter 26, first of all, God promised them fertility for both their people and their animals. Verse 4 of the passage. Blessed shall be the fruit of your womb, and the fruit of your ground, and the fruit of your cattle, the increase of your herds, and the young of your flock. So God will bless them and give them fertility. They can multiply. Secondly, God also assured them security from their enemies. Look at verse 7. The Lord will cause your enemies who rise against you to be defeated before you. They shall come out against you one way and flee before you 7 ways. So, they still have to fight in battle when enemy come. But then God assured them victory. Thirdly, God also promised them productivity. Look at verse 8. The Lord will command the blessing on you in your barns and in all that you undertake. And he will bless you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Fourthly, God also promised them certainty of rain. Remember, no irrigation system. Everything comes from the sky. Okay? So God promised them the certainty of rain. Go down to verse 12. The Lord will open to you his good treasury, the heavens, to give you the rain to your land in its season, and to bless all the work of your hands. And you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. And so with all those successes, God also assured them prosperity. They will be far richer than foreign people. So those are the blessings that God promised to his people if they obey him. From the Israelites, we can look at ourselves. How does the Lord bless you in these 5 and many other different ways? Well, similar to the Israelites, you or your ancestors came from a foreign land to this promised land called the United States. I had that experience. I came to the United States 1992. I came alone. I landed in the Houston International Airport. I mean, that was the very first time in my life to actually fly on an airplane. And I call it the experience of 2 suitcases. I grabbed the handles of my 2 suitcases and came alone. And then many years later, I grabbed the hands of my 2 boys. That is God's blessing to me and to my family. I mean, some of you even enjoy the blessing of multiple generations, right? Maybe your ancestor, your grandparents came to the United States first, then your parents, then you. Now you may have your children, yourself, or even your grandchildren. So think about all those blessings. And then during the whole process, you started from nothing, but God protect you over all the different challenges. Maybe financial challenges, maybe health, maybe other danger. So what attributed to the success of your American dream? Hard work, of course. Or making the right decision at the right time, perhaps. But deep down inside, everything comes from God's grace. He blesses you with good health, gives you intelligence so that you can study, gives you job opportunities, and protect you from different harm. You know, very often we can easily take everything for granted. Can we be just a little bit more realistic here? You know, I'm an optimistic person. I try to be. But I cannot guarantee that I will wake up tomorrow morning. It's that simple. And I try to stay alert when I drive, but I cannot control how other people drive in a town called Memphis. I mean, just this past Thursday, right outside Germantown Parkway, from the stretch from Costco to Chick-fil-A, that stretch, the same day I saw 3 car accidents. Well, thankfully, it looks like it's just property damage. There's no injury. I mean, no serious injury as I saw it. But anything can happen, and so we should always give thanks to the Lord. The point is that God is always watching over us, even when we don't realize it, when we don't feel it. God is always there for us, and so don't forget to thank God, even for very simple thing. And so, if we firmly believe that everything comes from God, then we should give back to Him freely. Paul says this in 2 Corinthians 9:7. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And so, our offering is a measure of our thankfulness to God. It doesn't matter how much you give, God sees our hearts. And if we don't give joyfully, if we don't give freely, there may be a few problems. Number one, we may worry that we don't have enough. Number two, we may get greedy because there are always other people who have more stuff than you, right? Number three, we may get fleshy when we have just a little bit more. It's a mentality of, hey, look at what I got. And then number four, we may get stingy and don't want to share what we have with others. But then if your heart is right, so will be your offering. And of course, offering to your home church is not the only way to offer. There are many other ways. There are many Christian organizations. One thing in common is they all need people's financial support. And the Lottie Moon Christmas offering is coming up soon. And that fund is used to support overseas mission. So there are different ways for us to give. And another thing we can learn from the Israelites when they celebrate the Feast of Weeks is that they make preparations. So we should also prepare our offering ahead of time. Say, for example, you can write your check on Saturday evening before you go to bed. You don't need to scramble on Sunday morning on how much you should give. And also, you should talk to your spouse, and between the two of you, you should determine how much you should give to the Lord. And also, it is never too early for parents to teach their kids to offer money. You have to let them know that your money is actually God's money. And even for little kids, I mean, you don't make money, but maybe you have a piggy bank. They can start early on to contribute money from their piggy bank. Bucks to them may be like $1 million. The point is they have to start practicing giving early on. And I know as a fact that some young people, they have they have their part-time job. So when you make some money, do you offer? You need to answer me. So the point is, if we are faithful with what God gives us when we don't have a lot, then when God gives us more, we can be more generous. And so the Feast of Weeks is a time of celebration for the Israelites. They give back a portion of what the Lord gave them first. And then secondly, God also asked them to give away some of the blessings to others. They don't just give back to God, but they also give away what the Lord gave them to others. Read again verses 11 and 12. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your son and your daughter, your male servant and your female servant, the Levites, which is one of the 12 tribes of the Israelites. And in today's term, we can call them religious workers. So the Levites who live within your home towns, the sojourner, the fatherless, the widow who are among you, at the place the Lord your God will choose to make his name dwell there. You shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and you shall be careful to observe these statutes. So God asked them to celebrate the festival even with the poor and needy people among them. At that time, land was an inheritance within the family given only to the sons. And so if there's no man in a family, then there will be no land to farm. And so all those visitors, the foreigners, the orphans, the widows, they would have a hard time to make a living. And back then, there was no charitable organization or social welfare system to help them. They are on their own. And so God told them to share kindness with people like that, just like God treated them. Their ancestors used to be slaves in Egypt. They had no resource, no land, no freedom, but God provided everything for them. And God took them out from Egypt and made them his people. And so they should give thanks to God and share what they have with others. And in Leviticus chapter 23, when Moses gave them instructions on how to observe the Feast of Weeks, he closed with these words. 23 verse 22. And when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, nor shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. So 2 things they have to do here. 1, the landowners should intentionally not to harvest the whole piece of their land. They should leave some areas for the poor people, the needy people to pick their food. This is number 1. Number 2, even when the workers, when they drop some produce on the floor, on the ground, they should just leave it there and let the needy people to grab those produce as their food, of course. And so it pleases God when God's people show kindness to others. Now remember, as I said at the beginning, that the Feast of Weeks was celebrated on the 50th day after the Passover. And the number 50 reminds the Israelites about another thing. It's called the Year of Jubilee. It was celebrated every 50th year. And the regulations about that particular festival was recorded in Leviticus chapter 25. And among other things they had to do, they had to cancel the debts from other people. So if some Israelites, they're too poor, they sold their lands to fellow Israelites, and in the year of Jubilee, they can get back their land freely. And even for people who are too poor, that they sold themselves as slaves to fellow Israelites, they would be set free in the year of Jubilee. And also, during that whole year, there will be no farming activity. So it gives opportunity for the ground to replenish its nutrients. And workers and animals would not have to work for the whole year. Think about that. It's like a year-long vacation. Everybody is free. And of course, if you live long enough, you will have only celebrate twice of the year of Jubilee, right? So you observe it every 50 years. Anyway, so questions. How could people get their food when nobody is working, right? For the whole year. God is very thoughtful. God told them that if you obey me, I will bless you. I will prepare ahead for you. Look at verses 20 to 22 of the passage. This is the question. And if you say, what shall we eat in the seventh year if we may not sow or gather in our crop? Lord says, I will command my blessing on you in the sixth year, so that it will produce a crop sufficient for 3 years. When you sow in the 8th year, you will be eating some of the old crop. You shall eat the old until the 9th year, when its crop arrives. So God will prepare 3 years worth of harvest ahead of time so that they can have enough food for the subsequent 2 years. God told them, if you obey me, you don't need to worry. I will provide for you. I will give you sufficient food. And so, if the Israelites obey everything God told them, there shouldn't be any poor people in the society, right? Those who have will give it to those who do not have. But of course, people are always self-centered, and people have little faith. And in the Bible, there's actually no record that people actually observed the year of Jubilee. And from the Old Testament time, fast forward to the New Testament time, there are a lot of changes. Israel no longer is its own country. It became a Roman territory. And people lost their family land. But then the principle of generosity, thank you, remains. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 8 to 9. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that, having all sufficiencies in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. As this is written, He has distributed freely, He has given to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. Now we look at verse 7 earlier when we talk about money offering. And actually this offering that Paul calls for is a special kind of offering. At that time, Jerusalem had a famine. People did not have enough food. And so Paul went about to different places and collect money and brought it back to the Jerusalem church. Jerusalem, if you remember, was the origin of the gospel. And Jesus' disciples, they went out and spread the gospel everywhere. They built churches in places like Asia Minor and Eastern Europe. Asia Minor is in the nowadays Turkey and surrounding area. Turkey is the name of a country, okay? It's not the bird on your dining table. And so, since believers in all those places, they received spiritual blessing from the Jerusalem church, they had an obligation to help those people back in their home church in Jerusalem. And then, of course, just like the biblical times, even in our modern times, there are always poor people in our society. And during this time of the holiday season, all different charities will ask for donation. And of course, we can and we should use God's gifts to us to help poor people. But then, a word of caution for you is we have to balance between love and wisdom. And you see on TV commercials or pictures, different agencies, they may post pictures of videos of suffering people in so-called third world countries, right? all those poor people have disease or skinny refugees. And sometimes we may just donate money out of compassion, and that is a good thing. Sometimes we just feel good when we put $5, $10 into the box. But then we need to ask ourselves, we need to ask a fair question: how much you donate actually go to help those poor people? You know what I'm saying? Of course, there are lots of responsible charities, but then there are some bad guys, cheat people's money. So we gotta have wisdom. So poor people, and of course there are other needs that we can give toward, just like the shoebox campaign, right? Deadline is today, so you gotta get things ready, get your donation ready. Now, as you know, the gifts will be given to kids overseas, and people will pack a gospel message in the box. So it's like killing two birds with one stone. You send a gift, and you also send a gospel message to people in need. Then, besides all those different ways to donate, we can also donate canned food or donate old clothes, right? But then, very often, what people need may not be material things. Especially in the holiday season, some people may feel lonely. They need some emotional support. Now, in the Feast of Weeks, God told the Israelites to gather the poor people among them and celebrate the season together. In the same way, when we celebrate Thanksgiving or the holiday season, we can invite single people to celebrate with you, right? Now, by single, it doesn't have to be young people. Some older folks, some retiree, maybe their spouse is gone. They may feel lonely, so gather them, invite them for a meal. It doesn't have to be your home, right? Go to a restaurant, go somewhere to have good food and just have good fellowship with one another. Or for some of the empty nesters, your kids may not be coming back for the holiday. You can, gather other empty nesters to celebrate the season together. And so those are some tangible ways for us to express God's love toward one another. And so if we see that everything we have is from God, then we should use everything we have for God. And if we are grateful to God for what He gives us, then we should be generous and gracious to others as well. And then I know that during this time of the year, when we are, focusing on celebrating the holidays, we can also be burdened by some problems in the world. There's inflation, we worry about crimes, right? And there are wars overseas. And those issues may take away our joy and our peace. But then thankfulness to God shouldn't be depending on how much we have. Thankfulness should come from our heart. It should be a measure of how we feel that we are undeserved of God's grace. And some of you may know an older song called Give Thanks. Give thanks with a grateful heart. Anybody know that song? Yeah. It's written by a person, a guy named Henry Smith in 1978. Now, at that time, Smith was frustrated by the fact that he graduated from college, but he couldn't find a job. And also during about the same time, he suffered some illness in his eyes, which eventually led to complete blindness. And then on one Sunday morning, Smith and his fiancée went to the church, and they were inspired by the pastor's message, in which he says, well, Jesus Christ was originally rich, but then he became poor for us. And so we may appear to have nothing, but in fact, in Jesus, we have everything. And so the message inspired Smith to write the song. And he performed it in his church several times. Then a military couple liked the song very much, and they brought it back to Germany, where they stationed. And so the song continues to become more and more popular. But Smith never published the song. And then fast forward to 8 years later, a friend played the song on a cassette tape to Smith. And he asked him, hey, have you heard the song before? And as soon as the music was played, Smith said, hey, I wrote that song. And so he contacted the Christian music company. And since then, over 50 different Christian music recording companies produces the song. And it was also included in a number of hymn books. 1978. So for the next 45 years, God has been using this beautiful song from a virtually unknown composer to inspire people, to remind us that there's always things we should give thanks for. And part of the lyrics say, let the poor say, I'm strong. I'm rich. I'm sorry. You're listening. Let the poor say, I'm rich. Let the weak say, I am strong, because of what the Lord has done for us. Give thanks. And in closing, I will invite the worship team to come up to the podium and lead us in singing the song.